One of my favorite memes right now is the one where the guy goes like,
He was whipping up anger in a kettle, festering hatred.
You know that one? Yeah, that's pretty funny. Anyway, let's read some hot takes. True Realm is poorly explained, and Hokazuna clearly doesn't know what to do with it. The earliest mention is chapter 14, where Shiba explains what it is. Then at the very end of the chapter, Kuro Shred implies that it's a part of the True Realm, but as we've come to learn, it wasn't. Hokazuna has made True Realm probably the most clear-cut idea in the entire manga, because it's not necessarily new to the medium in the slightest. Introspection that leads to power-ups is an age-old shonen classic from as far back as the Dragon Ball and Fist of North Star era. The True Realm is not one singular ultimate ability, but the reflection of you as a person in ability form. The reason it is nigh infinite in its possible utility is because your consciousness as a person and development throughout the years changes. Worldviews shift, realizations are had, rough pills are swallowed. Those truths change the shape of you, which reflects in the blade. Chihiro needs to save Char. He needs to be there for her, and that's where he becomes quote-unquote more flexible, the ability to do more things than one. This flexibility changes the singular Kuro into a school of mini-Kuros to signify that. Against Akemura, the Enten's true purpose becomes all the more clear as Chihiro realizes the scale of what his mission looks like, the one he had only a theoretical grasp of. Coming to terms with Akemura being close family and understanding this is what he signed up for, and the blade, now met with its purpose for creation, replies in suit. This is where True Realm and the nature of a blade intertwine. Kunishige coded the enchanted blades with general purposes, to protect, to support, to kill, etc. And the panel that speaks of Enten against Akemura mentions not only its true realm, but the nature of its mission. The Enten was, for all intents and purposes, made for this. These two all group into one because they align. I think Hokazuna should be more creative with the designs of younger versions of characters like Azami, Hagiwara, Kugara, etc. I don't like how he just plastered the same hairstyle and accessories on their younger version, and the characters need more variety in fashion. I understand what you mean by this, I really do, but in order to find our answer, I need to explain what Watsonian versus Doylist argumentation is. To put simply, Watsonian argumentation believes that all, if any, reasoning should come from inside the story's set rule set and explanation, while Doylism sees the out-of-universe approach as the most valid. You're seeing it from a Doylist perspective. Why do the Kaminabi all wear the same clothing? That's boring. Why do most of the characters have black hair? Hokazono should be more experimental. Why do most of the children look like their adult counterparts but smaller? These are all complaints that can't be refuted because it's just a matter of perspective. But to flip the idea on its head, by using Watsonian logic, the Kaminabi wear the same black religious adjacent clothing because of their organization's policy. It's an unspoken rule that hasn't been elaborated on in the manga, but the same way you have a dress code in a company, this is theirs. Slight variations can be seen depending on a person's rank, both because of the bureau background and not, but generally, it's a matter of rules. If you look toward the Hishaku, a ragtag group with zero care for them, their outfit of choice and fashion are all over the place, and that's by design. Hair color is always going to be an interesting one. Japanese, by genetic standard alone, sees more black-haired people than most countries, not far from how blonde people exist in majorly Nordic countries. But as far as children go, yeah, you got me there. Did we retain some features from our childhood selves? Sure, that's genetics. But I mean, most of Hokazono's child characters, like you say, are copy and pastes. Whether you see this as a flaw or not, still do yourself a favor and look at the little changes in design throughout the years. There's more than you'd at first give credit for. I got 4 replies regarding Hiyuki, so they'll be bundled up together. The take generally goes like this. Hiyuki's overrated, Hiyuki's a bum, Hiyuki getting together with Chihiro feels like forced head slop, benching Hiyuki in part 1 was a really bad decision. Hiyuki Kagare is introduced as the one person in the entire series to be equivalent to an enchanted blade. Let's just get that out of the way. If you think that's bum energy, especially since her talk has been met with equal action, then honestly, shut up, man. Hokazono did not make one of the most important characters with some of the most most important lore appear literally in its most formative chapters without having a grand plan for her. A commentary on government weaponizing fetuses, a wake-up call from Cog in the machine thinking, and of course, female empowerment. Everything circles around not necessarily Hiyuki, but the thematics her character brings to the table. Was it the best move to completely disregard her for everything post chapter 45, including the Kaminabi HQ raid? Yes, because she was guarding a sword bearer, and not just any sword bearer, but the only female one. The plot writes itself, I'll be honest. What I think is a vastly more interesting hot take is the shipping angle. This is a battle shonen, yet it strays from the norm immediately with its lack of fan service. Does no fan service mean you can't have romance plots? Kuniyaki, Yura wife, and Samurai Inori beg to differ. I think the better question to ask is, does Chihiro getting a partner, or even a child, do anything for his character? In my opinion, because of the generational trauma that still very much so lingers in the Rokuhira lineage and tainted his upbringing, absolutely. Does that make Hiyuki the only candidate? No. We could easily go a route where Chihiro's future spouse hasn't even been introduced yet. But is it head slop just because it has the chance of not happening? That feels a little narrow-minded, don't you think? This next one's a mouthful, but I also don't want to butcher their intent, so here goes. Shiba is the biggest fraud in the story. People always try to argue that he's strong. He's the pinnacle of sorcerers. He was one of the four strongest. Nobody says Shiba can't do anything. Shiba doesn't do anything, which is completely true. One of the most useful, versatile abilities in the series, and he's not there for 90% of the plot. Never be Soin, almost goes more with Tenri, let Sunja get away with Char, even though he can literally teleport. Doesn't exist Kuchiji for no reason, which would have prevented everything. Let both Rokuhira style and Chiro pick up and Agenda is all fun and games when you take it, treat it, and expect it to be a joke. But when you start to actively go against the narrative to feel your own delusions, it just becomes very unfun both to discuss and interact with. The take, agenda posting is genuinely the least fun way to engage with any series, let alone Kagurabachi. Every week is just Hirohiko's a bum, Shiba's a bum ad nauseum, and it's almost always proven wrong by the story itself, really encapsulates that more than I ever could. Rather than looking for the reasons for why Shiba almost lost to Tenri.
Because he's not one to murder children, you sicko.
Why he couldn't chase after Sojo when he had Char.
His sorcery will never be a match to an enchanted blade. Also, Chihiro was on the verge of collapse.
Why he wasn't at Senkuchiji.
Because he was with the Kaminabi assisting with the hiding of the sword bearer so they don't get clapped.
You're essentially just ignoring a part of the story, intentionally. Again, make a funny shitpost. I'll laugh. Hell, I might even retweet. Did you see Mike Up's new video? That shit was hilarious. But legitimately ignoring the story just to push your own agendas? Do better. The Hirohiko slander all the more. With Shiba, most of his lowlights come from his traumas. As for Hirohiko, however, his failures are the source of a new beginning. A literal character development spoon-fed to the viewer that you're willing to ignore all for a Hirohiko 3 mention. And while I defended Mike just now, I think the Uruha slander is also excessive as all hell. The guy came back from retirement, got killed by his essential best friend, resurrected, and immediately went up against not just the leader of an Akemura-powered Yura, but Hokuto while at it, and he whooped ass. How is that slander-worthy? Like, in the slightest? This next take made me tear up, genuinely. Not because it's hot, but because it's objectively correct. Akemura didn't carry out the malediction in one stroke, as some like to believe. I know he said he did it with one stroke, but I think what he meant was one attack. If it was one strike, then it should have been instant, right? How do you explain statements about Akemura stopping himself when the malediction was completed? Or in chapter 109, where the malediction gradually kept spreading? I think it's a process that takes time, not something that happened instantly. To play devil's advocate, I understand why Viz said what they said. Hitofuri, by dictionary definition, means one swing of a sword. But what's missing is series context. The 6 enchanted blades, Roppon, when listed in quantity, say by Kyora when he's talking about the Magatsumi, uses the phrasing Hitofuri not to refer to one swing of a sword, but one sword in a list of many. The same happens in chapter 31 when Yura speaks about wielding the Magatsumi. So when Akemura says, "Ore wa kono hitofuri de sore dake no inochi o nomikondan da," he doesn't say 200,000 lives with one stroke. That's how many lives I took. But very specifically, wielding this one blade, 200,000 lives. That's how many lives I took. I guess weirder about this albeit canonically accurate translation is the implication that the Magatsumi didn't kill a single person before the malediction. So that must be not necessarily incorrect, but a clear oversight. But yes, your reasoning is absolute, and exactly as it should. Every instance of the malediction and the time-adjacent remarks we've been given all imply the very simple truth that it's a gradual process, which, when you boil down the ability's power, that of drain and decay, only makes sense. Right? Mashiro's death didn't move me and needed more time. We return to Doylist and Watsonian with this one. Honestly, it's a thought process you can apply to anything. While the author has only written Mashiro for 9 chapters before their untimely demise, untimely being the keyword here, Shiba has known the guy for a few years. It is then Hokazono's duty to sell the audience on their friendship, and if you ask me, I'm biased. Not only did I do hours worth of deep dive into Kansai culture and psychological behavior study, which of course cemented my thoughts of wow, his subtle progression as a character really is special, I also have a very soft spot for these types of plot lines. I think the way he was inserted into the story, the role he occupied, and the lasting impacts we felt through Shiba would be more than enough to call him moving. People called him a bum written right, which for once is an acceptable use of the word. His awareness of being lesser than in comparison and taking full advantage of that is a serious power move and definitely worth writing home about. But this isn't your or my first shonen, dear anonymous submitter. Better written deaths exist. Is it a flaw? To you, it looks like it. To me, I see it as what Hokuzono meant it to be. A supporting act. These two exist in contrast, so instead of proving one or the other, I'll let you be the judge of which one is more valid. Many people's criticisms of the Kaminabi raid arc stems from viewing it in a vacuum. Like, yeah, some characters didn't get to do much because it's their introduction to the story. It'll get much more love once the story comes back to the present, and I feel like Hokazono introduced too many characters during the Kaminabi invasion arc, making it hella chaotic and didn't give some of them the proper room to breathe. Instead of just believing the claim too many characters introduced blindly, let's count them together. Kudo is one, although technically he was already introduced in 18 and 45. The Shikyu brothers are 2 and 3, but they serve as hype fuel, so do we really count that? Then we've got the unnamed uncle, whose character exists as a cowardly version of Chihiro's revenge path, Kashimo a dead man walking, speed girl and transformation guy, by all definitions NPCs. Kiri would be the next one on the list. Barrier keeper feels more like a walking thematic than a character, which becomes more vital with the addition of Yuki Sada. Then there's Uran, Bingo, Natsuki, and Hokuto. So all in all, 7 new characters. You might think that's a lot, but look at the Rakuzaichi. Soya, Tamaki, Tenri, Enji, Kiora, Hakuri, Kyuki, Tafuku, Yura. Hell, even the Akemura one-liner. That's 10, my guy. But no one has ever said that Rakuzaichi introduced too many characters now, did they? I don't think it's ignorance, but I also don't think that take is given much thought. The arc feels compact because the setting is compact. Layered levels and hallways, it's almost claustrophobic. But I cannot emphasize enough, on purpose. Many times during this arc, characters like Yura and Uruha fall out of the sky, literally breaking the structure of the arc and speeding things up by skipping levels. At the very end, Akemura literally blows a hole through the entire thing, serving as the ultimate example of how beyond the narrative his presence really is. But to add even more onto that, you're right, it's an introduction. It's not meant to be a full character exploration, because these are the main driving antagonistic force. Drip feed information, give the rest in chunks later. Are we really surprised that information is given sparingly in a weekly serialization? Come on, man, we can do better than this. The fandom tries too hard to create their own Megumi or artificial potential man. They've tried to do it with Hirohiko and now Shiba. The problem with JJK being the leading icon behind meme culture is that everyone wants to be JJK. Remember when Always If Never Is went mega viral? Everyone hopped to their own fandom to apply it to whoever they deemed best fit. But get one thing straight, JJK is not the origin of this format. One of its oldest use cases goes back to James Bond and the ever iconic 007, attaching it to Tumblr, 9gag, and meme compilations, millennial humor, COD lobbies, and of course, eventually finding itself onto NBA and football forums. JJK memes, the more more you look into it, are just worse versions of what football fans already mastered. So when the Bachi Bros imitate something that's already an inferior imitation, it will become worse in every respect. Most of the Hishaku are irrelevant to the story and will just be shields in a later arc for the overarching villain. I cannot express how much I hate this take. The Hishaku are still an enigmatic group, but their reasonings originate from a place of empathy. Yura lost his wife to violence, Hirohiko lost his life to sexual violence, and while the other 8 are still shrouded in mystery, it's not a far shout to expect them to be closely tied to societal issues and systematic mishandling. The Kaminabi are a faulty organization, built on an even more faulty predecessor, the Soga Society. The story pulls no punches talking about how much the system has failed the weak, and how the Hishaku are a reflection of that. Of course, they're not clean-handed either, and that's why they're branded terrorists, but they're a very human group with an all-too-human leader. To call them shields would be ignoring their cries for help, the cries even Chihiro is now unable to deny. To call them irrelevant would imply that the story's main focus is not in helping these victims of society, but to instead enact revenge because revenge is cool, or whatever. Essentially, this take boils down to viewing Kagurabachi as it is now, with the mindset of what it presented itself to be in the first chapters, which is of course you falling for the series' facade that's meant to be dismantled and reassessed by the reader. And the final take for this video, the Sword Bearer Assassination chapters 45 through 112 are one full experience, and cutting them into arcs like the website has defeats the whole purpose. Okay, now I'm actually crying. Yes, and even more yes. The Sword Bearer Assassination starts with this singular color page, signifying that all 5 of the sword bearers are now the topic of discussion. But of course, there's a 6th, Akemura. What do the Hishaku do in the Kaminabi raid? Well, they try to assassinate the motherfucker. Oh, what's that? Hokuto's character is specifically about him assassinating Ibuki? Oh, what's next? They try to activate Kuguri's enchanted blade by getting rid of its original owner? Gee, I sure hope we had a word for such an action. And don't even get me started on the Hishaku also actively wanting to kill Samura, which is, last time I checked, another fucking assassination attempt. So yeah, the website proudly declares that the SBA arc is only chapters 47 through 60, after which the Kyoto arc begins. And not only is this just factually incorrect, there is no such thing as the Kyoto arc, trust me, the manga would have said so. It's leaning onto the linear idea that these are to be treated as separate narratives instead of overlapping ones, which is by all definition what Hokuzono is after. Every single part of this flows into the next like butter in a way that is almost impossible to tell you where the raid arc begins and where the Kyoto arc ends. Coming from a One Piece fan whose favorite arc lasted 7 years, I think new gen shonen fans are allergic to the idea that arcs can be more than 10 chapters long. Yes, they exist. Read the big 3. And that concludes this Q&A, if you will. I had fun. I hope you did too. Like I said, there's still a good 90+ replies left, and I might ask for more, so don't be surprised if a part 2 or 5 or 6 or 7 comes in the foreseeable future. But for now, I ready myself for another dose of weekly Kagurabachi. I bid you adieu.